Have you ever been watching the Olympics and thought to yourself, this is great, but what would make it even better? Some parkour. No? Well, in that case, you and I watch the Olympics very differently, but if you do find yourself wondering why there aren't more off the wall events at the Olympics, both literally and figuratively, I got the competition for you. But before I tell you about it, let's take a second to talk about how and why certain sports reach the level of being Olympic sports. For example, sports like climbing, surfing, and skateboarding all made their debut at the 2020 Games in Tokyo, which happened in 2021 because of the thing. And the 2022 Games in Beijing saw the introduction of 7 new events, including big air skiing and snowboard cross. Pretty much every Olympic Games sees new sports get added and others get dropped, but most people aren't familiar with the process by which that actually happens. Until now. For a little sport that grows up dreaming of being in the Olympics one day, there are 2 main qualifications. First, that sport must be recognized by the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, as a sport. We've all had that debate over whether or not something qualifies as a sport, but these 105 people are actually in charge of that. Seems like an oddly esoteric way to decide that sort of thing, but hey, them's the rules. Once your sport has been given the IOC's seal of approval, the next step in the process is to get a federation, which basically just means form a governing body that organizes competitions and, most importantly, conducts drug tests. FIFA would be a good example of an international federation, albeit maybe not one you'd want your new sport to emulate. But your sport can't just be a sport to be in the Olympics. It has to be a popular sport. For a men's event, the sport has to be played in 75 different countries across 4 continents for it to even be considered by the IOC. And while it's less so for women's sports, it's still a really high threshold to get over. Those are the main 2 qualifications for becoming an Olympic sport. But even if you have a federation and a lot of people around the world playing your game, there are still a lot of other factors that go into the IOC's decision, including one that is depressingly familiar. If you look at the events added to the Summer Games in Tokyo, specifically climbing, skateboarding, and surfing, you might notice a bit of a theme, which is that all of these sports are very marketable to a younger audience. The Olympics are technically a non-profit, but make no mistake about it, the IOC wants to choose events that are going to make them and the host city money. Baseball and softball went away temporarily, not because they didn't have a federation or a big following, but because building the stadiums required to host them was too expensive for the countries that didn't have them already. So if you want your sport to be in the Olympics, it can't just be official or organized or even popular. It has to be all of those things and be profitable, which is why you see so few new events from year to year. But what happens to all those events in the middle? Not every sport can be gymnastics or swimming, but there's some good stuff between that and, chess. What do we do with the best of the rest? Well, my eclectic friend, let me introduce you to the island of misfit toys that is the World Games. Since 1981, the World Games has been the biggest multi-sport event going for non-Olympic sports. And buddy, when I tell you that this thing is not what you're expecting, just know that I'm telling you the truth. Not that many people even know that the World Games exist, which is just a gosh darn shame, because to know them is to absolutely adore them. When I first heard about the World Games, which I have to admit was upsettingly recently, the only thing I could picture was a kind of Olympics light, sort of the NIT to the Olympics NCAA tournament. They're pretty similar in structure, and the World Games are technically under the purview of the IOC, but trust me, they are wildly different. Like, if the Olympics are the NCAA tournament, then the World Games are like a slam ball tournament or something. They're as fun as they are weird, but just like their Olympic counterparts, they feature the absolute best in the world in the events they're showcasing. But what are those events exactly? The way I see it, events at the World Games fall into one of 3 categories. First, there are the events that you're probably at least a little familiar with. Sumo wrestling is one of the more well-known attractions, as are bowling, billiards, lacrosse, and powerlifting. A few of the events, like softball and archery, either have been or will be in the Olympics in some capacity, or already are in one way or another. But then there are the events that you likely have some kind of concept for, but may not be able to conceptualize in this kind of setting. I couldn't, at least. I know what tug of war is, but I had no idea there was this much of an international appetite for it. But there sure is. After it fell out of the Olympics in 1920, it's been in the World Games since the very beginning. The Swiss are evidently super good at it, which I find a little ironic considering their historical lack of willingness to choose a side. Parkour would also fall into this category because while, yes, I do technically know what that is, I have no idea how you turn that into an Olympic-style event. Canoe polo is another one. I know what both of those words mean, but honestly, I'm not sure what you come up with if you put them together, but dang it if I don't want to find out now. The last category of events at the World Games is the ones that I have literally never heard of in my life. Like korfball. What the heck is korfball? The internet tells me it's a combination of basketball and netball, which would be helpful if I knew what netball was, but apparently the Dutch invented it and have won every single gold medal in it at the World Games since it was introduced in 1985. Then there's fistball. What is fistball? I have no idea, and frankly, I'm not entirely sure I want to. Orienteering is an event at the World Games, but other than it being outside, I guess, I have no idea how it works. Then there's wushu, which I was pretty sure I'd never heard of, until a quick Google informed me that one of the other names for wushu is kung fu, which I have heard of, but mostly from a movie about a cartoon panda. Now, you may hear all of that and think, nah, I don't think any of that's for me. I like my track and my gymnastics and my hockey, and I'm not about to waste any of my precious free time on some artistic roller skating. And to that I say, fine, but I think you're missing out. For the sports that weren't deemed worthy of being in the Olympics, which we've established may or may not have anything to do with their actual value, this is the absolute best showcase you're ever going to get. You might turn into the biggest dance sport or fin swimming fan in the world, or even one of the athletes participating in it one day. But if you never give the World Games a chance, you'd never know it. Personally, I am pumped about watching these games. Not only because this year will be my first chance to watch the best racquetballers and water skiers in the world do their thing, but also because the 2022 World Games are in Birmingham, Alabama, the greatest city on earth that also just happens to be where I was born and grew up. In addition to giving some of the lesser appreciated sports out there a chance to shine, the World Games also provide an opportunity for less heralded cities to host a major world event. Instead of your standard Beijing, Tokyo, or Paris, you get cities like Karlsruhe, Germany, or Cali, Colombia, or Santa Clara, California hosting the World Games and showing off what makes them great to the world, while also providing a potentially huge economic benefit to the people that live there. Above all else, that's what I, a World Games rookie, already love about the idea of it. The World Games helps put people and sports on the map that might not otherwise get the chance to be. This is normally the part of the video where I tell you that the real World Games were the friends we made along the way or whatever, but not this time. Today, I'm just going to tell you to sit back and enjoy the heck out of this thing, because opening ceremonies were on July the 7th, and after a year of it being delayed because of COVID, World Games 2022 in Birmingham, Alabama is finally underway. You can watch the whole thing on Olympics.com right now for free, and we'll be able to watch it all the way until the World Games end on the 17th. I can tell you from the Birmingham side of things that hundreds of people have been working for months and months to make this event as special as possible, and that some of the venues they've chosen are going to be absolutely spectacular. So invite a couple of friends over, order some pizza, and watch the freaking World Games. It may not be what you're used to, but sometimes that's a good thing. Read up on the rules of life-saving, because apparently that's another one of the events. Take some time to educate yourself on the finer points of floorball, and enjoy the heck out of some air sports. Because yes, these events are weird. No, you probably haven't heard of a few of them, and most of them will never be in the Olympics. But even though they're technically the best of the rest, these sports and the athletes that play them are still as good as it gets. And this is their chance to show it. Oh my god, you guys, the World Games are finally here. I know it might seem silly to people that don't live there, which technically includes me, I guess, but there's been so much excitement about the World Games coming to Birmingham and everything that's come with it. It's been a huge local undertaking, with venues that have never been used for sports like this getting a makeover to host certain events, and big public works projects opening specifically in time for the World Games to start. We were all pretty bummed when they got pushed back a year, but now we'll get to have all of the World Games athletes and their fans from around the world experiencing our wonderful city. I hope that some of you join me in watching World Games 2022. Until next time, I'm Will. Happy World Games, everyone!